The mall in 1980s America was not just a place to shop. It was the center of teenage social life, the place where you spent entire Saturdays, where you met your friends, where you figured out who you were. The mall was freedom. Your parents dropped you off with $20 and picked you up hours later. What happened in between was your world: the stores, the arcade, the food court, the people. The mall in the 1980s was a cultural phenomenon that defined a generation. Walking through those automatic doors meant entering a space that was yours. Let's walk through what going to the mall actually felt like in 1980s America. The mall was where you went to hang out, not necessarily to buy anything. Your parents went to the mall to shop. You went to the mall to be there. On Friday nights and Saturdays, the mall filled with teenagers. Groups of friends walked the corridors, sat on benches, and leaned against railings. You were not there for a specific purchase. You were there because that is where everyone was. Parents dropped you off at the entrance, and they picked you up at a designated time and spot. In between, you had hours of freedom. You wandered with your friends. You sat in the food court. You went to the arcade. You window shopped. The mall was climate-controlled, safe, and full of things to do. It was the perfect place for teenagers to exist without adult supervision. Mall walking was an activity in itself. You walked the entire mall, loop after loop. You saw who was there. You ran into people from school. You checked out what was new in store windows. The walking was social. You talked, you laughed, you made plans. The mall was the place to see and be seen. The stores defined the experience. Every mall had anchor department stores at each end. Macy's, JCPenney, Sears. These were huge stores where your parents shopped for appliances and clothes. You mostly avoided them unless you needed something specific. The real action was in the smaller stores lining the corridors. Record stores were essential, like Sam Goody and Tower Records, with walls of cassette tapes and vinyl records. You flipped through albums and listened to samples on headphones at listening stations. Buying a new tape was an event. You studied the cover, read the liner notes, and memorized the track list. Bookstores like Walden Books and B. Dalton were everywhere. You browsed magazines, looked at bestsellers, and bought paperbacks. Spencer's Gifts was the weird store. Blacklight posters, lava lamps, gag gifts, and risque items in the back. Teenagers loved it because it felt slightly forbidden. Clothing stores had distinct identities. The Gap was for basics. The Limited was for trendy women's fashion. Chess King sold bold styles. Foot Locker sold sneakers with employees in striped referee shirts. Every store played loud music. The music pulled you in. Stores were sensory experiences, not just retail spaces. The arcade was the heart of mall culture. Every major mall had an arcade, and it was always packed. The sound hit you first: bleeps, explosions, music, the clatter of machines. The arcade was dark, with flashing lights from dozens of game cabinets. You came with a pocket full of quarters. Each game usually cost a quarter, sometimes 50 cents for newer machines. You played Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Galaga, Defender. Later in the decade, games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat became common. There was always a crowd around the popular machines. Kids watched, waited their turn, cheered, or groaned. High score lists were serious. Getting your initials on the high scoreboard was an achievement, and you guarded your spot. The arcade had a social hierarchy. The good players got respect. The kids who could make a single quarter last 30 minutes on one game were legends. You learned by watching. The arcade was competitive and collaborative. People gave tips and showed tricks. The arcade smelled like carpet, popcorn, and electronics. It was loud, chaotic, and perfect. You could spend 2 hours and $10 in there easily. The food court was where you gathered. Food courts became standard in malls during the 1980s, a central area with tables surrounded by fast food counters. The variety was the appeal. You could get pizza from Sparrow, Chinese food from a generic takeout place, a hot dog on a stick, an orange Julia smoothie. Cinnabon filled the area with the smell of cinnamon rolls. Everyone had a regular order. You sat at the plastic tables with your tray. The food court was the meeting point. If you got separated from friends, you met at the food court. The tables filled with teenagers eating cheap food and talking for hours. The workers were often teenagers too, wearing uniforms and visors, taking orders. The food was average, but that did not matter. The food court was about the social experience, not the cuisine. You bought a slice of pizza and a soda, and you had a place to sit for as long as you wanted. Fashion and window shopping were central activities. You did not always buy, but you always looked. Store windows displayed the latest trends. Mannequins wore what was cool. You studied the displays, noted what you wanted, and planned future purchases. Trying things on was part of hanging out. You and your friends went into stores, grabbed armfuls of clothes, and headed to dressing rooms. You tried things on, came out to show each other, laughed, and gave opinions. Buying was optional. The trying on was the fun part. Mall fashion in the 1980s was distinct. Preppy looks with polo shirts and khakis. Punk styles with ripped jeans and band shirts. New wave fashion with bold colors and geometric patterns. Neon everything, high-top sneakers, acid-wash denim. The mall was where you figured out your style. You saw what other people wore. You tried new looks. Fashion was not just about clothes. It was identity. The mall was where you constructed that identity. The atmosphere of the mall was unique. The design was deliberate. Skylights brought in natural light. Fountains and plants created a pleasant environment. Muzak or pop radio played overhead. The temperature was always comfortable. The mall felt like an indoor main street. Walking the corridors, you passed kiosks selling sunglasses, jewelry, calendars. People sat on benches watching crowds pass. Older people mall walked for exercise in the mornings. By afternoon, teenagers took over. Security guards patrolled, watching for trouble. Mall security was not intense, but they watched teenagers closely. Signs saying no loitering were posted, but they were rarely enforced unless you caused problems. The mall cop became a cultural figure, the authority teenagers tried to avoid. Stores had different closing times, but the mall itself closed at 9 or 10. Closing announcements came over the intercom. The lights dimmed slightly. Employees started pulling gates across storefronts. You headed to the exit, usually the last to leave. The parking lot at night was a final gathering spot before everyone went home. The mall in the 1980s was a cultural institution that defined how teenagers socialized. It was safe. It was fun. It was yours. The stores, the arcade, the food court, the freedom. For a generation, the mall was the center of social life. Those memories stay vivid. The sounds, the smells, the feeling of walking those corridors with friends. The mall in the 1980s was more than a shopping center. It was a place where you grew up. If you remember spending your Saturdays at the mall in the 1980s, hit that like button and subscribe for more nostalgic looks back at what life was really like back then. Share your favorite mall memories in the comments below.